introducing Art Burton, who will be our host for the evening. Art is a researcher and a historian and an award-winning author. He writes about the accomplishments and sagas of African Americans and Native Americans in the West, in our Western history. He believes that the real history needs to be told, which does include us. I want to tell you a little story about how I met Art. When I was a student at Columbia College, Art Burton, he was the director of African American Student Affairs, and I had a student organization, so we had to correspond quite often. And at that time, he only had written one book. He now has 4 books, but I still have my original copy. And this book is called Black, Red, and Deadly. And it's signed by him. Oh, let me see if I can get it in the frame. Here we go. Since then, he has written several books. And what is funny is that just recently, when we decided to do this rodeo roundup and show this documentary the next 8 seconds, I thought about Art, and I knew that, you know, he writes about this topic. So I decided to look him up. We had kind of lost contact. I decided to look him up, and I went onto his webpage, and I found out that he just wrote his 4th book, which was called Cherokee Bill. And it just so happens that Cherokee Bill is actually an ancestor of mine. And so, you know, I'm Muslim, so I don't believe in coincidences. We always say, us as Muslims, we say Allah made it happen. But it was just very interesting that after all of these years, when I come to contact him again, I find that he had written about someone that was a historical figure in my family. So I hope you get to know him more through the course of this conversation. Again, I am honored to introduce him. He has quite a bit of knowledge to share on this subject of the West and our influence on the West. And I think he would add to this discussion quite a bit. So without further ado, Art Burton.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you. I'm more than happy to be here. Anytime we're talking about the Black West, either current or historically in the past, I'm always eager to be of help and try to do what I can to assist. And I would like to say you were one of my better students. So, you know, that's great to see that you have come along and done so well. This documentary on Mr. Holmes is outstanding. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen on a rodeo artist, Black or white. And I think that Jeff Chambers has done an excellent job of filming and editing this documentary, and just outstanding. So we have some questions. What I'm gonna do first, though, I'm gonna introduce everyone, and they're gonna say a little bit about who they are. And we'll start off by introducing Mr. Jeff Chambers, the filmographer and director and editor.
Hey, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Chambers, and I'm a director, producer, writer, and I'm the director and writer of The Next 8 Seconds. I'm originally from Louisiana, but I live now in Houston, Texas. And being in Houston gave me an opportunity to be exposed to more Western culture, specifically rodeo and bull riding. And being more exposed to it, I took an interest in bull riding. And once I took that interest, I just opened up and said, well, look, this is something that I believe I need to tell a story about. And lo and behold, I saw one African-American bull rider amongst a crowd of Caucasians by the name of Neil Holmes. And once I introduced myself to him, he told me what his story was. and it was absolutely amazing. And I knew right then as a creator that I needed to make sure his story was told. So we started working on a documentary, which is the next 8 seconds, and it really takes you through the history and the current history of black men in bull riding. So through following Neil and understanding more about the sport and understanding more that it is not just something crazy folks do, it is an actual art. And cowboys, black cowboys, and black bull riders have been prominent in the sport throughout history.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Next up, we'll have the legendary Harold Cash, who was a bull rider, a bronc rider, and a rodeo producer in Texas. Introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Harold Cash, and I'm a real black cowboy. I started off riding bareback horses, and I won the championship in '79, All-American Rodeo in 1981. And in 2010, I was inducted into the National Multicultural Western Heritage Hall of Fame. And I'm president of the Harold Cash Living Legend Rodeo Association. I guess we'll start this because cowboys don't do anything but that, starting with prayer. Sometime around that Cruel Rodeo Association, a prayer was all that a black man had that sometimes they could depend on. Let us all bow. Dear Heavenly Father, we are paused in the midst of this. But dear Lord, we know you for all the things that you can do, dear God. As a cowboy, we'll ask no special favors, not as to help from keeping breaking a barrier in a time event, or even drawing a horse that's a cinch to win. And whatever you do, dear God, don't make us a little normal. While we might ride a bull that's never been broken, but give us the strength to perform in the best of our ability. And when we make that last ride, oh yes, Lord, let that be the ride into your heaven. These blessings we ask in your name. Let us all say amen.
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 Thank you, Harold. Neil Holmes, the bull rider, is with us, but we're having a little technical difficulty, but hopefully we'll have him on board shortly. So what I like to do now is just let Jeff talk a little bit about how he put this together and his inspiration for doing this documentary, which is an outstanding film on Neil Holmes, the bull rider. So Jeff, just tell me a little bit about how you got inspired to do this.
Okay, so it's really a short story. Um, in Houston, we have Rodeo Houston. It's a very big rodeo here in the city of Houston, and I took my kids there just so they could enjoy the festivities. And as I passed by this billboard, all I seen was white bull riders, and one speck on the billboard was one black bull rider. And I said, "Oh, I didn't even know black people rode bulls. Good luck, black bull rider." And I moved on. Later on that night, I turned on the TV, and there was a highlight about a black bull rider who had just missed near-death experience on a bull. And I was like, "Oh, it had to be the black bull rider." Wow. So couple of days went by, and I went to the very last day of the rodeo, and just so happened I seen that one person, which was Neil Holmes, signing autographs. And I said, well, let me go and at least introduce myself to him and say, hey, what are you doing? Could you pick an easier sport? So as I introduced myself to him and talked with him, he was like, yeah, this is an actual sport. I'm not doing this because I'm crazy. This is something I've been taught how to do. I have a passion for it. And my journey to get here was amazing. My story is unique. And I said, well, I'm a filmmaker. I'd like to hear your story. So we talked for hours upon hours about his journey from childhood to college to professional bull riding to uh, giving back to the whole works. And I was like, man, that seems like a very interesting subject matter to make a documentary about. So we talked about it, and just like that, I said, hey, we're gonna roll cameras on you and we're gonna tell your story. So about 2 years it took to cover all of the different aspects of the documentary, with the interviews, with the um, going to the different cities and capturing Neil in his in dangerous situations, in from every aspect. And once I felt I had enough footage, I started editing, and I didn't know what I was going to come up with, but I knew I was going to have something good enough to tell his story, because I felt like um, this was a trailblazer that came along um, behind other trailblazers from history. Especially a lot of times blacks have been shut out of history, cut out of history, and that's not the case. We want to make sure these untold stories are told. And I said, well, I'm gonna make it my purpose to tell your story, and hopefully it'll resonate with others and inspire others. So from the time I seen that there was only one bull rider on the board in the sea of Caucasian bull riders, to the time we finished the last interview with amazing stories and an amazing journey, an amazing career, accomplished career, I knew that we had something special in the next 8 seconds. And I chose the title "The Next 8 Seconds" is because you not only have to stay on a bull for 8 seconds to win the prize or best the bull, but after those next 8 seconds, you still have a life to live. You still have a journey and a story to keep pushing on, keep moving on with, and especially for African American. As African American, this is what I consider history in the making, especially in a sport that's not been very kind to African Americans in a Western heritage. So that's kind of where I got my where I pull my story from when it came to telling Neil's story.
Very good. Was there one thing that you felt that you learned overall over this whole experience?
There was a lot of things I learned over the whole experience. I had never been in what you call the buck and shoot, where they load the bulls and where the bull riders get on. I learned that that's a technique. I thought the bulls were always just angry and would buck you off, but that's not the case. As I talked with one of the trainers explained to me that it's an art to making these bulls do what they do, and I didn't know that. That was
Right.
one main take I got from it, and got from the film and documentary, as well as the fact that this is an actual career. It's a worldwide sport, and you can make a career of it every day, every week, every weekend if you choose to, and make lots of money. You know, you can become a world champion, as we alluded to in the documentary with the first African American world champion in Charlie Sampson.
Right.
You can break barriers in the sport, and not only just for the cash prize, but for being a pioneer and moving our African American culture forward, breaking barriers in every sport.
Right. Okay. Very good. Very good, Jeff. Is Neil available yet? I don't think so. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna move to Harold. And Harold, can you talk a little bit about how far has rodeo come since your early days in rodeo in Texas?
Yeah, rodeo have came a long ways from my days, and other cowboys before me that really broke the ice back in the 40s. like the professional bull rider, Willie Thomas Sr. He started before Murtis Dykeman, and he helped Murtis Dykeman. Then it went down to Murtis, and Murtis Dykeman helped Charlie Sampson. Murtis went to the finals some 6 times, and he finished as close as 3rd one year. Let it be said and told, Murtis probably should have been a whole lot of world champion, but it didn't happen.
Right.
Murtis trained Charlie. Charlie Sampson became the first professional bull rider in 1982 to ever win the world. And now we got Neil Holmes, Ezekiel, other people that's coming up. It goes way back as far as Willie Thomas. And he was speaking of the 8 seconds. Now, sometime back then it was 15 or 20 until you get thrown before they would blow the whistle. So yeah, bull riding and rodeo and that can't go on.
That's a lot different. that is a lot different. Okay. Neil, you with us? Neil, can you hear me? I guess he can't hear me. What was the aspect of race in rodeo, Harold, back in the day when you were starting out? I know it was segregated.
Before me, yeah, it was back as far as me in the 40s with Willie Thomas. Just talking to them guys. He deceased at 91 last May, but these guys Bibles, rodeo Bibles, they know it all. And the things that they took out there, they had to rodeo after the rodeo. They couldn't rodeo with the whites at the time. They would tell people that the rodeo was over, and then they'll let the blacks ride. People didn't really know nothing about the black cowboys. And I think Murtis Dykeman was the one that started whites to riding with the blacks because he rode a bull, and they had sent everybody home. They had a newscaster out, and he thought he had lost his job, little black kid, because he didn't see the bull that had never been rode come out. And Murtis rode him that night.
Right.
And the town, next time it got all, they wrote the PRCA. And they had to do something about it. And they say the next time that a black man ride after the rodeo, it had to be 2 whites ride after the rodeo too. And that's what started blacks to ride with whites, because they didn't want to ride after the rodeo. So that Murtis got credit for that. Murtis, he should have been a lot of work.
So he was like Jackie Robinson, but in rodeo.
Murtis.
That's interesting.
That's it, Jackie Robinson of the rodeo.
Right.
Along with
Jeff, when did you see your first rodeo?
My first rodeo
1967. Right. Okay.
So my first rodeo actually was as a little kid growing up in Louisiana. It really wasn't even a rodeo. It was just a fairground with a fence around it, and some people brought in bulls and folks got on them, and it really didn't catch my interest as a little kid. I just wanted to play, but that was my first experience of seeing it as a young child, and I didn't understand it until adulthood, and when I would go to Rodeo Houston. So yeah, my first experience was just seeing bulls, and was like, all right, that's just a big cow. But now that I understand it, I totally respect the sport. Yeah.
Right. When I was a little boy, my relatives lived in Oklahoma, and there was a rodeo circuit that went from Oklahoma through Texas to Louisiana. I do remember those 3 states being involved in the early 60s in rodeo, and it was segregated, but Louisiana was definitely in the mix back in those days with the black rodeo. Harold, how many rodeos have you done in Louisiana? Did you rodeo a lot in Louisiana? Did you hear me?
Lake Charles, Monroe, Louisiana. Yeah, in Monroe, they had some big rodeos in Louisiana.
Monroe?
And
okay.
Monroe, Lake Charles, and New Orleans, Louisiana. That's a big rodeo.
Right.
And Willie Thomas, I was telling you about, they escorted him to the line. Yeah,
right. Jeff, if I can ask you another question.
Sure.
When you first heard about rodeo, was it black rodeo or it was just rodeo in general?
Yeah, it was actually just rodeo in general.
In general, right?
And every once in a while, I would be watching TV and I would see rodeo on TV, and all I saw was just white cowboys. And I thought,
Right.
oh, that's what it is. These guys are crazy enough to get on this bull, and that was it. But never was exposed to black rodeo, black cowboys, black bull riders until later, until I moved to Houston. It was
Right.
kind of a culture shock, but it was very intriguing to understand and learn more about it.
Right. I think Houston, from what I was told, had 3 or 4 black cowboy bars, even where black cowboys went to hang out and socialize. Yeah, Houston is in the mix when it comes to black cowboys. Actually, the origins of the black cowboy is East Texas and East Oklahoma, especially down on the Gulf area near Mexico. That's where a lot of the origins of the black cowboys started, and they had a lot of interaction with Mexican cowboys down on the southern Texas region. So, that's the way I got into it. My cousins in Oklahoma were very much into the rodeo, and I would go with them to the rodeos. And I was living in Chicago at the time, and I just thought this was like the land of Oz, And my folks lived in a little black town of about 350 people, and they rode horses up and down the streets all day long, dressed in cowboy garb, and it was just a whole different scene than you would see on television or in movies because they didn't show black cowboys. But that was the life that my relatives lived in Oklahoma. So it was quite fascinating at that time. So Harold, as a rodeo cowboy, how many years did you put into the rodeo as an active participant?
I was getting broke up and unbroke up anywhere from 6 to 7. And I made my last ride in 95 in the old time.
So from 1967 to 95. Right.
1995. Yeah. And like you were saying, Oklahoma and Texas, they produce most of the cowboys in rodeo states. You could find a rodeo in Texas or Oklahoma in a 300-mile radius just about every day.
Right.
And speaking of Chicago, we used to go to the amphitheater on 43rd and Halstead.
Right.
With the third Latin rodeo production. And it was a sign that really caught my eye the first time I went to Chicago. They're hanging over the street that say the Black Cowboy, the forgotten man of the West. And that stuck me, and that's what it was back then, the forgotten man of the West.
Right. Yeah, the amphitheater was right next to the stockyards, and people used to say that the stockyards was the end of the Wild West because that's where the cattle was brought to, be processed for beef industry. And that rodeo Thurl Ladding put on was something to see. It ran a whole week, and they would bust school children in all week long to see that black rodeo that was put on, and they bring cowboys from Texas and Oklahoma and California and Colorado. And it was quite popular every Black History Month in Chicago, the Black Rodeo. So it was a biggie. I remember it very well, and Thurl was a good friend of mine. So Jeff, have you been to an all Black rodeo, Jeff? Yeah. Black produced rodeo. I don't think it is all Black.
No, I haven't been to an all Black produced rodeo. Actually, I'm looking forward to go to the Bill Pickett rodeo because I know that's a long-standing rodeo with a lot of history to it. So I'm definitely gonna go to one, but I haven't been to an all Black rodeo or all Black produced rodeo.
Yeah. Most of the time today they're Black produced, but they're not segregated. So you'll find white cowboys participating in many of the Black produced rodeos. Actually, Harold produces a rodeo in Texas that maybe you can visit sometime. Sure. I hear it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, very good, very good. I did. do some writing. My most recent effort, I wrote 4 articles for True West magazine, and they're about a Black deputy U.S. Marshal named Bass Reeves. And he had a lot of similarities to the Lone Ranger. So the question is, could he have been the inspiration for the Lone Ranger? And the article in there, we talk about that, and it's quite interesting. But Bass Reeves was one of those Black frontier heroes that kind of got left out of the narrative for years and years until I wrote my first book in 1991. And I talked about him, and people started hearing about Bass Reeves. And so now he's getting bigger and bigger. And there's Black Westerns being made now, thank God. I know we have one on Netflix that'll be coming out soon called The Harder They Fall. And they're going to use a lot of real Black frontier hero names, but it's going to be a fictional Western movie. But that's all good too, because the depiction of Blacks in the West has been far and few in between. So the more, the better. So that's very good. Harold, can you tell us about your rodeo that you produce in Texas?
Yeah, it's called the Harold Cash Living Legend Rodeo. And we put on a rodeo for the deceased Black cowboys of that year. And we invite their family into the arena during intermission and give them a plaque and let them know that they are gone, but they're not forgotten. And some of these cowboys were never recognized during it. We recognize them on the way out. And it's been going on for 15 years. And I give a couple of scholarships away, $500 scholarships, not much, but it buy a book. And it's going real well. I had to cancel this year due to the pandemic. But speaking on the Black rodeo, that Bill Pickett Association, it makes cowboys aware of the Black cowboys. And it's a real good organization, all Black rodeo. But that's all we had in the days back then, was all Black rodeos, because we couldn't get to the white. But the Pickett rodeo is doing a great deal.
Right. What town was Willie Thomas from, Harold? What town was Willie Thomas from? Willie Thomas. What town was he from?
A little town called right outside Rosenberg, Texas. It's called Boot, Texas. A little but he was raised on a slave plantation. He was raised on, which is now a big historic building called the George Ranch. But it was a slave plantation back in the day.
Right.
He was raised on.
Okay. Very good. So Jeff, what's next for your documentary? Where does it go from here?
Okay. So the documentary is right now, we're doing the film festival circuit, and it's screening all around the world. I actually just finished screening in Toronto and East Europe. So it's doing very well, and I have a couple of folks that are looking to take it to the next level along with myself.
Right.
So I have enough content to expand it out and tell a bigger story past what we have packaged already.
Right.
To go beyond that. And this is one thing I wanted to actually touch on, is that I know that in history, Black cowboy history was always left out.
Exactly.
It was never told to Hollywood. It was always someone else who pioneered something in or saved the person. And that's fine. But as a filmmaker, I'm dedicating to change that. So along with the actual documentary, I have a full screenplay that is going to be set in motion after the documentary finishes the festival circuit, that's going to highlight the history and the history of Black bull riding, Black rodeo, Black cowboys, up to the handing. It's kind of a handing of the torch from your Bill Pickett's, who pioneered in bull dodging, to your Willie Thompsons, to your Charles Sampsons, your Meredith Dykmans, all the way up to Neil Holmes, Ezekiel Mitchell, Owsley Mitchell. So it's going to be passing the screenplay is set to show the levels of how Black cowboys and bull riders and Black pioneers actually set the tone and made history that was left out in Hollywood. But we're going to change that as filmmakers.
Yeah, you know, in Oklahoma, the most famous cowboy has an airport in Oklahoma City named for him. It's the Will Rogers Airport, National Airport, International Airport. And Will became famous in Hollywood in the very early days because he could rope very good. He was an excellent roper. But if you look at the history of Will Rogers, he was taught how to ride and rope by a Black cowboy who was the foreman on his daddy's ranch named Daniel Walker. And nobody hardly knows anything about Daniel Walker today. But he was the Black cowboy that taught Will Rogers how to ride and rope and have those skills, which took him, you know, to international fame, and worked on the 101 ranch with Bill Pickett. So that's great, Jeff, that you're going to, you know, do this and have this inspiration to follow up your documentary with more information on blacks in the West. I think that's excellent.
That's definitely.
Hera, how hard is it for a Black rodeo artist to stay in the sport today? What type of sponsorships do a Black rodeo cowboy need?
That's what it takes, sponsorship. And like back in the days, the cowboys didn't have that. There was a whole lot of the other guys that would rodeo and know why they were going to their next rodeo because the money was there. But sponsorship is a big deal. A whole lot of the cowboys back then, they didn't know how they're going to get home or get to their next rodeo with that sponsorship. You know, and there was another guy in Oklahoma talking about this Will Rogers. That was one of the toughest cowboys. That was a Black cowboy too with the same name, Marvell Rogers.
Right.
Marvell Rogers was, he was one of the greatest cowboys from Oklahoma himself.
Yeah, in terms of Oklahoma, yeah, Marvell is considered the greatest Black rodeo cowboy from Oklahoma. And he rode bulls and broncs and used to have a cigar. He would light his cigar. And when the bull went up in the air, he came down, he would throw a puff of smoke up and he called it his choo-choo ride. But he made a lot of money because he couldn't compete against the whites. And they used to pass hats around after the event. And people called it the hat ride. And he made a lot of money doing that because the white participants who came to the rodeo wanted to see Marvell ride bulls and broncs, which he was excellent at doing. So it's, you know, it's quite interesting type of aspects. Yeah, it appears that you know, when I was growing up and coming down, I had two cousins that were doing tricks. They did horse tricks in rodeos in Oklahoma, and one of my cousins actually was the last bareback champion at the Drumright Rodeo in Oklahoma, and I was always impressed with their horsemanship and their skills. And I for a long time I thought about what was the history of this. Was it just something blacks was doing contemporaneously? And then as time went on, I realized that African Americans had a bigger part in the West, but it hadn't been recorded. There was one book when I was in college, though, that did come out called The Black West by Harold Katz. And it was a picture book. It didn't have a lot of text, but it was a good picture book. And I, you know, thought that was good, you know, start. But by the time I had started teaching in college, I started thinking about the fact that there must be more out there. So in 1991, I did a lot of research prior to that in terms of especially looking at Oklahoma, but also all the West. And so my first book I wrote was called Black, Red, and Deadly, Black and Indian Gunfighters of the Indian Territory, 1870-1907. Now, a lot of what we call cowboys, and from a Hollywood standpoint, is the fact that they were either outlaw or lawmen. That's what the movies that Hollywood made. Hollywood didn't make a lot of movies about rodeo artists. They made a few, but not many. Most of the time, they were making movies about outlaw and lawmen in the Wild West, and they called them cowboys. So that was one of the impetus for me to write this book about Blacks who were either outlaw or lawmen. And the biggest percentage of them, for the longest part of the time, was in the Indian Territory, where they had an indigenous population of African Americans who had been, prior to the Civil War, enslaved by the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole Indians that had been forced to the Indian Territory, later be Oklahoma, by Andrew Jackson in 1830. And so that was my first book, Black, Red, and Deadly. And then my second book is titled Black, Buckskin, and Blue, and it's about scouts and soldiers who were on the Western frontier. Black, buckskin, and blue, African-American scouts and soldiers on the Western frontier. And this talks about a lot of individuals that were scouts and mountain men and the Buffalo Soldiers. And it's one of my favorite books that I have written so far. And so I was very glad to do that. But after I wrote Black, Red, and Deadly, there were many people said that I need to write a book just on Bass Reeves because he took up the larger portion of Black, Red, and Deadly, but they felt there should be more information. So I went back and did empirical research and wrote a history book on Bass Reeves, who was the greatest lawman. I mean, they've made movies about Wyatt Earp and a lot of other lawmen, Wild Bill Hickok, but Bass Reeves was the greatest lawman in the Wild West, bar none. And Black Gun, Silver Star, The Life and Legend of Frontier Marshal Bass Reeves. So those were the things I did. And then my last book that I wrote is on Cherokee Bill, who was everything Hollywood tries to make Billy the Kid up to be. And Cherokee Bill was a classic outlaw. He stuck up trains, banks, and stagecoaches and was very good at what he did. And sadly, he came to a tragic end where he was caught and he was executed before he was 21 years of age at the Fort Smith Federal Court in Fort Smith, Arkansas, which had jurisdiction over all the Indian Territory, which at that time was 75,000 square miles. And so it was the real Wild West. The Indian Territory was pretty wild, along with parts of Texas. An interesting thing about Texas, though, Texas had the Texas State Police, which was half Black during Reconstruction. You hear very little about the Texas State Police, but the Texas Rangers were reintroduced when Reconstruction ended in 1875, and there was no Blacks in the Texas Rangers until about 1986. But that's just a little history on Blacks in the West and my participation in trying to write about this history. But I'm going to see if I can write a little bit more about Black cowboys who were in the rodeo and Blacks who trail cattle. During the cattle trailing days, at least a fourth or between a fourth and a fifth of all the cowboys who trail cattle from Texas to the railheads in Kansas and Nebraska were African Americans coming out of Texas. And sometimes all the cattle crews were Black. So you'd find a cow trail and all the cowboys were Black. And so that was quite interesting to see. My books are available on Amazon.com. And I do have a website, artburton.com, which can give you information how to purchase my books, and also have articles that I've written on my website at artburton.com that you should be able to check out. Did we get a chance to get Mr. Holmes at all? Is he available yet? I know we're having some technical difficulties. I guess we're still having some.
Yeah, I don't believe we'll still be waiting on him if he joins. But if not, we definitely want to make sure we highlight him in the documentary, so you can learn a lot more about him there, because he's actually more of a shyer person. Doesn't like the spotlight. Doesn't like to talk about his career that much. So hopefully he joins and we can get a little bit out of him. If not, then we definitely encourage you to go and watch the Next 8 Seconds documentary.
Yeah, the Next 8 Seconds was excellently edited. The editing job was fantastic. It flowed very well. It was very educational, and you had other things he did beside rodeoing, where he went in and helped the community when they had the terrible flood in his town, and he helped out tremendously. So cowboys have a big heart. They some of the best people you can get around, really, as a cowboy. So that was marvelous. So it's a lot of aspects of his life and about rodeoing that you show in the documentary that I thought was very, very good.
Thank you.
Harold, did you have any thoughts on the documentary? Harold, yeah. Unmute. You muted.
That was my hero after reading the book. And Bass Reed was
All right.
so tough, and if he go after, they say he would bring you in. It was a guy dreamed that Bass Reed was looking for him and got in and went and turned himself in the next day. Bass Reed was so bad. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Neil Holmes, he did a lot for the community. A lot of cowboys, they have good hearts, cowboys. But just the way they got treated back in the day. You imagine just one person out there. It's not an all-black rodeo. Neil Holmes was probably the only black at the rodeo. Sometimes like Willie Thomas.
Right.
And Murtis Dykeman. And you have nobody to encourage. You have nobody. It's not like baseball. You ain't got nobody to throw it to. Not like football. Ain't nobody blocking for you. You are one-on-one with the bull. Besides what you were going through out there at the rodeo after it's all over, riding 15 and 20 seconds. Sometime the whistle didn't blow for you. The guys had to have a heart to stay out there. A lot of other cowboys, they had families that could have made. I would like to see at least, like in the calf roping and the professional, we got them coming in herds with the Corey Solomon and different cowboys. 3 or 4 of them is out there now. I would like to see that in the PRCA instead of just the Neil Holmes or Ezekiel Ellis that's out there by himself. The door is open now, and people like Murtis and Charlie Sampson, and they open the door. So it's time for these young kids to get out there and make a lot living of it, because you can make $1 million at rodeo, and back then $200 or $300 was a lot of money, but they make $1 million at rodeo.
Yeah, it's a lot of money in rodeo now. It's a lot much more money than it used to be. So it is moved into a whole nother realm of sports, and so I think the audience is building too. I know the Pro Bull PBRs come through Chicago, and they have good crowds go to the bull riding in Chicago. So, and all across the country. So I think the money is there, and I think the sport is going to continue to grow. And I think young African Americans, if they want to get involved, I think, as long as they train well, I think they'll have great opportunities in sport. What do you think, Jeff?
And just
yeah, definitely. Actually,
is interconnecting with the Bill Pickett Rodeo Association at a couple of 2 or 3 rodeos. That's a big start for that to get acknowledged to the PBR with the Bill Pickett Rodeo. I think it's going to start this year. I ain't got all the prospects behind it yet, but it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a big deal.
Do we have institutions that train cowboys and cowgirls in Texas? Black cowboys and cowgirls in Texas, Harold? Is there any training facilities for young people?
You got rodeo schools. Yeah, you got rodeo schools that people go through, and for Charlie Sampson, he have his own rodeo school.
Right.
He have training facilities. You got them in Texas, but the best training, I guess you would say, is at the rodeo. It's not as big as other places. You got rodeo schools that they can go to. Where back in the days, you got on and learned what you know and learned from the other cowboys around the rodeo association. Now they got schools that you can go to and start off from kids coming up that got rodeo school. All American Youth Rodeo Association, little town in Fresno, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a deal going on real big. But if
That's
Cowboy
great.
wanted to learn, he can learn. And just wish I have a whole lot more to get out there. Charlie Sampson, he didn't come from a rodeo family, but he was the first black to ever win the world. How many other kids is it out there that don't know anything about rodeo that could be world champions? That's my whole thing. Black that could be world champions.
Yeah, I know in Oklahoma and Texas, there's high schools that have rodeo as a sport, and then there's a lot of universities and colleges that have rodeo as a sport in the West that people can get scholarships.
All over now.
Actually,
Yeah.
All over.
You can actually go to college. You actually go to college on a full scholarship,
Right.
through agriculture or through being able to um, do types of your rodeoing, horse barrel racing, bareback riding. You can actually get a full scholarship and go to a university
Right.
coming out of college. And some of those are some of the avenues that I believe some of the youth need to take.
Black.
Right.
Tex Williams. We had a guy named Tex Williams. He was the first black back in the days, back in the late 60s, that ever made it to the college high school finals and won it one year. A cowboy that probably could have been out there and won a whole lot of world champions.
Yeah, I know Cleo Hearn from Oklahoma was the first black cowboy to get a rodeo scholarship to Oklahoma State University. And he kind of broke that ground. And Cleo has gone on to be a great rodeo promoter, producer. The Cowboys of Color rodeo is the rodeo he produced. Right, Cleo Hearn. Done very well.
Yeah, he's a living legend. He's a living legend. He worked rodeo back during the time when Murder's died. He was a calf roper.
Right.
Yeah, Cleo got a lot of things going. He have really exposed black rodeo.
Jeff, what was the aspect of when you made the documentary? I know you learned a lot of things. What was some of the things that were just kind of just threw you off kilter? You didn't know this aspect of culture existed in terms of the rodeo culture.
Let's see. So one aspect that surprised me was what I touched on, is that I didn't know that you could get a full ride scholarship to go to college through rodeoing. I thought it was always something basketball, academics, or athletics is how you advance from high school to college. But after talking with Neil, I realized that he was able to go to a prominent all-black university on a full ride scholarship. And that was one thing that kind of threw me off, but actually encouraged me because of the fact that helps me to highlight getting the youth to understand this is another path that you could take versus the traditional path. You learn a whole lot in agriculture and in the Western heritage. And this could be something other than going into engineering. You can go into agriculture, and make a great living, a great career from it. That was one of the things that actually kind of surprised me. But also the one thing that really surprised me, but didn't surprise me that much, was the the discrimination. The blatant discrimination is I'm pretty sure we can all touch on the fact that in almost every sport there's been discrimination through history.
Right.
And rodeoing and bull riding is not exempt from it. I remember being at one of the first rodeos that we filmed. I filmed Neil at, and guys were not nice. They were just really racist and
Wow.
discriminative.
The bull riders, did they have any type of insurance for injury?
So if you're lucky or fortunate enough to have a good sponsorship or some type of good investor behind you, of course they're going to put insurance on their investment.
Right.
So you'll have access to insurance for any unfortunate events like injuries. But most guys, if you're not fortunate or even if you're like just African American, if you're a Black person, you don't get that much sponsorship. You may go without insurance, so you're all kind of risking your life, hoping that you don't get injured at any one of these events or coming out the buck and shoot. So that is definitely kind of a handicap when it comes to some of the African American bull riders, but hopefully that can change through people seeing these type of films, or seeing folks like Neil or Ezekiel Mitchell or Alcee Mitchell come to the forefront and be just as good as everyone else. That way they will give them what is deserving: more sponsorship, more insurance, more opportunities. So like I say, trailblazing is what we've done years after years, and I want to make sure that the persons that are here in the future get that opportunity to get as much as the next person.
Yeah, Neil has some terrible injuries, and I'm glad he got those taken care of. Harold, what racism did you face personally when you rodeoed in your early days? Unmute, Harold. All right.
It was out there then. But in the 60s, it was racism out there, different places that you went to. Before as the Cowboys, some of the white Cowboys were better friends than to you. Some of the Black Cowboys, it was man against beast out there then. You know, they try to help you as well as you would try to help them, some of the Cowboys. But like I say, it was just a way of life back then. But people like Murtis Dykeman, Willie Thomas, all them guys took a whole lot of stuff off that is boiling down to now that changed things, you know. And yeah, Willie Thomas, he took a lot just talking to him, Murtis Dykeman. As far as getting hurt, it ain't if you get hurt, it's when. Because you're gonna get hurt. Neil Holmes went through a whole lot of bull riders. Charlie Sampson broke over 32 bones in his face.
Wow.
Putting on a rodeo for the president, Ronald Reagan, up in Washington.
Wow.
Charlie, they say if the doctors wouldn't have been at the rodeo with Ronald Reagan, Charlie might not have made it. Had the good doctors right there at that time. I guess the least person that got hurt around the rodeo circuit and been out there long was Murtis Dyke. He was the least one that got hurt. Everybody else that got broke up. You got people like Gary.
What?
Might have lost.
Right.
A lot of bull riders out there, and it ain't if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt, and it's gonna happen. You know.
The top of the game today, though, Harold. What type of money? What type of money can you make in prize money? What type of prize money is in bull riding today? Prize money. What type of money can you make?
Today, you can up to $20,000 in one rodeo. They got a bull where they put on $1 million ride for a bull, the championship bull ride. Back then, $200 or $300 was a lot of money then, but the cost of living wasn't as bad. But you figure out you got to do this, ride the bad bull, plus you got to go through all the prejudice stuff that you go with, and the cheating and everything that go along with it back then. It took a cowboy. It just took the state out there. I admired a whole lot of them guys. If it wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for the Willie Thomases, the Murtis Dyke, or the Charlie Sampson that really seen the prejudice part of the rodeo.
Well, we really want to acknowledge that rodeo cowboys are some of the best athletes in the world. To ride bulls and broncs, and to have these fantastic roping skills, barrel racing, which the females do, is very skilled sport. And you have to be very good. You have to put a lot of hours of practice in to build your skill up. And African Americans have been involved in this sport for years and years. And it's time that people acknowledge the African American participation as not just the rodeo sport, but in the whole cowboy culture. And I think that's happening more and more as we move forward. So I'm just happy that, you know, we're acknowledging more and more. And as this documentary film that Jeff Chambers has put together has, you know, helped us understand the aspect of the Western culture and the Western rodeo culture and African American participation, I think it's just going to get better as we go into the future and celebrate these people. And I look forward to Mr. Chambers and Mr. Cash and Mr. Holmes with their contributions to this culture as we move forward into the future.
Yeah, it's glad to be here, and I would like to thank Bill Pickett Rodeo Association. They're working with the kids, barrel racing. They have a youth. They don't leave the youth out when Bill Pickett gives the rodeos, and we're gonna see a whole lot of world champion that's coming up. Working with Bill Pickett Rodeo Association, it's just so many. It's just so many doors are opening up for us now. Where it wasn't even recognized. We got people writing books now on the Black Cowboy. Mr. Keith Cartwright got a book coming out in November. Dr. D. Pearson, a story on Willie Thomas, Black in the South, the best bull rider you never known.
Right.
Just so many
Excellent.
people done everything for the Black Cowboy. Miss Gretches, just so many people. The doors are open there. We wasn't really spotlighted then, and we didn't ever document nothing, but just the doors are open. And I can see, and I know, and things getting better for the Black Cowboy now.
Well,
And
we're
we got
going
better
black.
athletes now.
We're going black to the west, so y'all get ready. And I appreciate everybody's participation, and I love doing this. And I'd like to thank the San Antonio Black Film Festival, International Film Festival, for having this documentary. Thank you.